Okay, so put our date for today, and today's lesson is on independent versus dependent variables. Should probably add the word variables in there. Okay, so basically we're talking about the two variables that we want to graph. Okay, there's the independent variable, and the independent variable is always placed on the x-axis. And the independent variable is just that. When you think about independent, it is does not rely on something else. Okay, so let's put that. Does not rely on another. In our math, most types of independent variables we see are like time, because if you think about it, time can't change. It comes and it goes, and nothing influences it anyway. So cannot be influenced. I just spelled influenced. Influenced. Forgot the L. See, that's what I get for picking such a big word. Influenced. There. Good. Now, dependent is exactly the opposite of. So if this is on the x-axis, this must be graphed on the y-axis. And just the opposite of independent, it is reliant on something else, right? So it relies on the happening of another event. Or you could say it's dependent on another event, therefore it being dependent. Okay, so let's look at just a couple examples here. Okay, so trying to look at it. That's not what I want. Sorry. All right, what is going on? Sorry, technical difficulties. Okay, so if we look at this problem situation, Benjamin works at a printing company. He makes t-shirts for the high school volleyball team. The press he runs can imprint 3 t-shirts per minute. So here you can kind of see that's more of like a rate with the school's mascot. So our two things are, we have t-shirts and we have minutes. So we have a certain amount of t-shirts that can be printed in a certain amount of minutes. So one of these is independent and one of these is dependent. Okay. Well, the number of t-shirts printing depends on how much time has gone by. So we would call the t-shirts our dependent variable, which would go on the what axis? The y-axis. And then we would say our minutes, because time is an independent variable in of itself, is independent. And then that will be placed along the x-axis. Okay? So when you read these, you kind of have to pick out what the two variables are. So here we picked out that they were t-shirt and minutes. And then you have to determine which one's independent and which one's dependent. Okay? So let's try another one. I lost my little arrow for some reason. All right, so here we have Sophia. On her way to work, she purchases a small cup of coffee for $4.25 from the coffee shop. Okay, so our two variables are going to be a cup of coffee, right? And then we have how much it costs. So we have to think about which one's independent, which one's dependent. So I always sort of say these in my hand. Is a cup of coffee dependent on the cost, or is the cost dependent on how much coffee you purchase, right? So is the number of cup of coffees dependent on the cost, or is the cost dependent on the number of cups of coffee you buy? And I would say yes. I would say you don't know how much something costs until you know how many cups of coffee. You know that a cup of coffee is $4.25, but you wouldn't know your total bill till you knew how many cups of coffee you were going to buy. So the cost is dependent on the number of cups of coffee you buy. So cost is going to be our dependent variable, because we can't figure out our price until we know how many cups of coffee we have. So this would be our independent. Okay, so just the first step is to pick out the two variables and then put them in a sentence. Is the number of coffees dependent on the cost, or is the cost dependent on the number of coffees? Okay, so kind of do that back and forth. So I'm going to have you try the next two on your own here. Let's see, you're going to do this one here. I think it's 3 actually. This one, we want to know, I'm trying to make it smaller so it'll fit into your little screen here. The independent dependent variable here. Then I want you to do this one. And then this is the last one. Give it a go. And I made that so short. Have a good night. Good Monday.